So then, as you see it, what is the state of secularism in Britain, and what do you think are the strategies for advancing secularism in the most effective way?
Gosh, I mean, through my own experiences, I mean, when it comes to primary schools here, which is, the school we go into when we're 4 or 5, um, there isn't much choice. I mean, I went to a Church of England primary school, and I've got friends who've got children, and their only options are a choice of one or two Church of England primary schools. And, from that very early age, there is a very religious agenda in these primary schools. I mean, in the early 90s when I went to school, I can remember I'm left-handed, and I can remember being forced to sit on my left hand and write with my right hand. And that's something that people were kind of outraged about when I kind of told people about that, because they were like, no, that's something that, used to happen. It doesn't happen anymore because we're not as strictly religious in this country. But clearly, there are problems. And when I went to my Church of England primary school, we weren't really taught about other religions. I knew that there was somebody in my class that was Jewish, but I didn't know anything about his religion or what he believed. And I can remember having like an assembly one day, and his mum and dad kind of came in and did an assembly to teach us about their faith. And then after that, the kid who was Jewish kind of had a hard time, with everybody else after that, because he was Jewish and everybody else was Christian. So I think, for an advancement of secularism to happen, there need to be more options for education. And we spoke about the faith school problem, but, even just the state-funded Church of England schools, they have a deeply religious agenda. And I think it's a huge problem. I know one of my local friends, she's only got very young children, and already she's trying to find somewhere that doesn't, that they can go to school that doesn't have that deeply religious agenda, and she's really, really struggling to find somewhere.
So what is this? I mean, it really boggles my mind that if a majority of the adults, or at least a sizable minority, are irreligious, that they're letting their kids be indoctrinated, even in the public schools. So then the question then is, does this mean that the younger generation is actually winding up more religious than the older generation? What is your experience, everybody?
Well, I think figures have shown that those attending church, young people attending church, the figures are falling. But just through my experience, I know that until I went to secondary school, where you have to integrate with so many different people from all different walks of life. To me, Christianity was the only kind of religion that was worth listening to or following. But that's just from my own experience. I really don't know about other people.
I have one slightly optimistic thing that I could say. So I think, as recently with the whole atheism plus thing, there's often a kind of tension between, do we call ourselves atheists or humanists, or what are we really about? Hayley, have you clicked your screen? Is your small bit selected? It's just odd because I'm only seeing you on the screen.
You're okay. We see you. I see.
Yeah,
Hi.
we can see you.
Yeah, you look beautiful.
Thank you, Ed. So do you. But I think a lot of the sort of current institutions of British humanism, like the British Humanist Association, really took off in the 1960s and the 1970s. They were around before that, but I think a lot of their current members and big figures are people who are our age then. And it seems to me that was a time when it was assumed to some extent that religious belief was just something that was going to die out. We would just become socially secular in the future. You can go back and watch all those things from the 60s about how in the year 2000 everybody would have nuclear-powered hoovers and things like that. I think the idea that we would all be atheists in the future was just something that was sometimes taken for granted. That, as all of us can see, has not been true. If anything, there's been a resurgence and a recuperation of religious belief, particularly the extreme forms, which is why I think we need skepticism as well as secularism. But one thing I could say is that I find that our generation, the people who are in the secular community, tend toward the skeptical side, and the atheist side, and the big red A side. And the religion is bad, we should talk people out of it. Not universally by any means, but I think there is a tendency toward that with people our age. And I think that suggests that our generation often sees that these things matter. You know, we're not apathetic about religious belief. We see it as an issue, which maybe is not always a thing our parents experienced. I think part of the sort of the social consent, we can send our kids to these schools, we can have bishops in our parliament, etc. There's just this feeling that it's of no particular consequence. It is of consequence. We can see that now, we've seen it in the last decade. And I think people who have grown up in that decade are realising that. So we do have potential members who have come of age and are students now, people who I think can be reached out to. I think the future has a lot of potential for the atheist movement.
Great. And so, yeah, it's an interesting distinction I've never thought of before, distinction between needing not just secularism but skepticism, because of the way that, being de facto secular is not enough if you're not skeptical of supernaturalism, things
right.
like that.
And we can get rid of all the bishops in Parliament and all the faith schools and all the religious exemptions from the law, things like that.
Right.
Personally, I won't feel that my work is done, because there will still be parents who promote religious bigotry. There will still be people who are suffering from mental health problems and go to priests and preachers because they think those are the authorities. Right. There'll still be parents who kick their kids out of the house because they're gay and they don't think God likes them. You know, we won't solve the problems just by having a religiously neutral state.
It seems like religion. It seems like religion in the UK lost on every area that it could that was a matter of being competition, and then it's just its institutional supports keep pumping it alive with all these extra benefits.